It is Tennessee Homestead. How the heck are you? Hey, today I want to talk to you a little bit about something pretty serious. And that is the Ukraine. Yeah, isn't that great? Isn't that a lot of fun over there? But I've been doing a lot of research on this, and I got to be quite honest with you. I have to ask the simple question and see if any of you have a real good answer. Stick it in the comments below. What exactly does the U.S. involvement with the Ukraine? What does it mean to us? National security? Economic driver for this country? No, not unless you count the amount of money that the Ukraine has thrown into the Biden's personal accounts. Short of that, not really any, big deal to us. Anyway, let's look at this. Ukraine, how did we get where we're at? We got the U.S. going toe-to-toe with Russia over the Ukraine. So what's the history of this? Well, you got to go back quite a ways. You got to go back to the 1990s. You're going to have to go back to the fall of the Soviet Union, where the Western countries, the Western Alliance, which we were very much part of, had made an agreement with the Soviet Union that if they gave these border countries autonomy, that we would not, read my lips, would not expand NATO eastward. Yeah, you heard that right. We would not expand NATO eastward. That is not the case. We have expanded NATO. We have put NATO troops and offensive weapons on Russia's borders in these countries that we said we would not expand NATO into. So let's start talking about this just a bit. Starting in about 1993, we started flooding people into there. The Ukraine was a country whose government at that time was friendly with the Russians. In 2013, 2014, they had an election, and it became primarily a capitalist Western-style government, which, by the way, immediately seized Russian nuclear weapons inside that country and cut the Russians off from their main military bases in the Crimea area, which included their biggest base for their Black Sea fleet and things of this nature, and would not negotiate with Russia to allow them to have that land back. So in 2014, Russia slid in there and, by force, annexed Crimea, which they could have done with an election, but the Ukrainians didn't want any part of that, so they took it by force. Now then, they were talking about annexing some more land so that they had a land route to access those bases. Here again, the Ukrainians refused, and the locals in that area started a rebellion, I'm sure backed by the Soviet Union or by Russia, but they started a revolt to claim autonomy over their area. Well, in 2015, there was an agreement signed. It was called the Minsk Agreement, how to resolve these issues peacefully. One of the things where they were going to have an election to see if they even needed to go any further, allowing the people of that area to vote whether or not they wanted to be part of Ukraine or whether they wanted to go back to the Soviet Republic. Well, the Ukrainians saw that they were not going to win that election, so they've just never held it, even though they signed an agreement saying they would. They did. But let's go back to the 1990 agreement, where we said we would not turn these border countries into NATO-aligned countries and put weapons and troops in those countries. Take a hard look. You tell me, have we done the exact opposite of what we said we were going to do? Yeah, we have. And through the 90s, we had steadily marched up and brought countries into the NATO alliance, sent in foreign troops to prop up their military, and brought in offensive weapons. So we have stacked up offensive weapons all around the Russian border. Russia drew the line with the Ukraine because a lot of their military bases and so forth were located in Crimea. They weren't going to tolerate it. Did we tolerate it in the 60s when Russians put offensive weapons in Cuba? Or were we willing to go to war over that? Yeah, we were. But I'm afraid if you agree that the United States was well within its rights to go to war with Russia over missiles located in Cuba, then I'm sorry on this one, you're going to have to side with the Russians threatening to go to war over the fact that they've encircled their borders and put offensive weapons all over the borders of Russia. Now, Russians okay with leaving these as NATO countries. They'd just like to see the excess troops and offensive weapons withdrawn out of them. But mainly the big huff is over the Ukraine because it backs right up to their border. Why did we do that? Yeah, because the Europeans and Americans are not real good at keeping their word. We've seen a lot of that in our very recent history and our prior history, that we are pretty much liars. Nobody in the world trusts the word of the United States of America. It's worthless because they won't stand behind it. You know, we had a new president come in, shut down our oil exploration and our existing drilling operations and extraction operations in this country, all in the name of green energy, and went overseas to buy gas and oil and so forth at higher prices, and took us from being energy sufficient, self-sufficient, to being back on the world market, totally at the whims of the world market prices. Great, wonderful idea. Shut down the pipeline, Keystone Pipeline, put thousands of American workers out of work. Towns that popped up along that pipeline are disappearing into the dust. Why? Because we don't keep our word for more than 4 years at a stretch. Yeah, that's the problem. And since it's all done with executive orders, it's quick and easy with presidents, but I think we need to take that power away from them. Use executive orders for ordering stationery. Short of that, they shouldn't have the power to do that. They need to pass legislation to do it. That would alleviate us keeping our word a little bit longer. With all that being said, that's where we're at with the Ukraine. We have no security interest in the Ukraine other than to protect Europe. It doesn't involve us. But yet we're sending American troops into the area to possibly go to war with Russia. For what? So that Joe can improve his ratings? I don't think he's going to improve them much. Here's where I'm at with the whole thing. All in all, NATO, good idea in the 40s, maybe in the 50s. By the 60s, it was getting kind of old. We should not be in NATO. Europe is rich enough and powerful enough to maintain its own security. Why are we footing the bill to defend Europe? All the NATO countries that are in the NATO treaty since the 40s is supposed to have been paying 2% of their gross national product into NATO to provide troops and weapons to defend Europe. They have been. We're up to 4% to cover the gap. But even Germany, which has an economy much to equal ours, hasn't been putting in but more than 1.5%. Wonder why Europeans get early vacation or early retirement and lots of vacations and stuff of this nature? Yeah, well, they're not having to pay for their own defense. Why are we getting involved? You got NATO there. If the Europeans don't like what's going on in the Ukraine, let the Europeans step up and bring it to a close. It's Europe, after all. They always tell us to butt out of their business unless it comes down to somebody dying. And then they very much want to send their business. You Americans go die for us, please. And by the way, pay the bill. So Trump had made a big issue of this and had went into Europe, and they didn't like him at all because he says, hey, you can pay your own weight, or I'll pull the plug on our part of it. And I wished he would have. There is no reason under the sun for us to be in NATO. Huh? Let Europe protect Europe. Okay? We don't have a word to say in the European Union and so forth, so why are we risking our people's lives? You think they're going to run over here if we get attacked? Don't hold your breath. Okay? Do not hold your breath. And you see France and Spain and Turkey and all them going, oh yeah, we're going over to protect the Americans. Not going to happen. So for our part, NATO's just worthless to us. We have 50,000 troops scattered around in Europe. Not NATO troops, but assigned to NATO. We have 50,000 just American troops in bases, lots of bases, that we're paying billions of dollars in taxpayer dollars every year to have. Let NATO take care of that. We don't have to pay for the bases. These people that are there, I know my ex-brother-in-law. Now he's a big defense contractor. He makes a lot of money. Bought a villa, has motorcycles, new cars, spends a lot of money in Italy. If we brought our troops home, all those troops and all the civilian contractors attached with those troops would now be in the United States. Doing what? Buying houses, buying cars, furniture, groceries. All that would be part of the U.S. economy. Instead of us propping up the European economy with our troops, and that was the big complaint the last time that this was talked about, was, oh, it will hurt the European economy. That's okay. We're not Europe. Take care of your own business. We'll take care of ours. Common sense. As far as us getting involved with the Ukraine, we should have nothing to do with it. Instead, we're spending millions of dollars and sending more troops into Europe. No, Joe. You know, number one, as a commander-in-chief, buddy, you suck. That was the worst military fiasco. That was worse than Vietnam, man. That was horrendous. But that's okay. You went over the horizon to strike back and kill that bunch of kids, didn't you? Well, has anybody been fired for that, Joe? Has anybody had to take responsibility for that, Joe? You say the buck stops with you, but you haven't taken any responsibility for any of that mess. I think you lied to us, Joe. Yeah, I do. Simple fact, folks. And I'll put these things up. These are the new NATO countries that have been added since the 90s when we told Europe and the U.S. and Europe told Russia we won't put people or place or NATO troops in these countries. We lied. Europe lied. They're surrounded. I want you to ask yourself a simple question. And this is the question you need to ask your senators and your representatives. Would you back if Russia put troops and offensive weapons in, let's say, Canada and Mexico and Cuba? Would you back us to just say, sit down and shut up and don't worry about it? Do you think America would do that? Or do you think the people would be up in arms telling the government, you need to stop this, get those weapons off our borders? So if you can legitimately say, heavens no, we wouldn't want offensive weapons and troops on our borders, then you agree with the Russians. Think on that one a minute, America. Russia's saying, don't put your troops on our borders with offensive weapons. We do not want them there. And we're going to start fighting back. And it wouldn't surprise me if holy heck breaks loose over there. You're not going to see them hit all those different countries, one at a time, driving NATO out. And how many of our sons and daughters may be in the midst of all that mess, and we have nothing to do with it, really. We're overshooting off our mouths. You know, Biden's rattling his saber. Even the Ukrainian president's going, hey, Joe, settle down, sit down, be quiet. You're causing panic over here. You're causing problems. Even the Ukraine president's telling him, whoa, son, slow it down. And you got Republicans and Democrats out there rattling their sabers. Oh, we can't put up with this. Russia, 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 Russia. I'm sick of Russia, Russia, Russia. What if it was us? I want each one of these senators and congressmen to answer that question. If Russia put troops and offensive weapons along our northern and southern borders and in Cuba, would you have a problem with that? And if we insisted that these troops and weapons be removed from our border areas, would you say we're being the aggressor? Y'all need to wake up. We did it in the 60s, threatened to blow Cuba off the map and go to war with Russia over the same reason. There was a lot less of it. Look at the map. Russia's not in the wrong here. Matter of fact, they have shown a lot of restraint. As far as I'm concerned, they really have. And then we need to look at it going a little further. We need to bring our troops out of Europe. There's no reason we have 50,000 troops in Europe twiddling their thumbs, playing little silly war games over there. Bring them home. Bring them home. Bring that money back into our economy. Bring them back into the States and let them buy houses and cars and furniture and food and gas and whatever in our economy. Quit enriching the Europeans while we pay their load to even provide their defense. Wonder how the Europeans end up with all these early retirements and weeks of holiday pay and all this kind of nonsense? Because we're covering our butts with defense. Wake up, America. We're paying that bill. That's your dollars coming out of your pocket. How much could we cut the defense spending just by that one thing? Take our troops out of Europe. And tell the UN what we're going to do, or the NATO forces, what we're going to do is we're going to take an average of the number of countries you've got, how much you're paying in, and we're going to average it out, and that's our share from here on out. So if you guys don't want to pay anything into NATO, neither will we. Have a nice day. And quit spending 4% when everybody else is at about 1.5%. Some of them hit up to 2% now and again. Can we cut our budget? We're at the verge of bankruptcy. We can't afford to spend a dime, really. We have high inflation. Our utilities are going through the roof, and yet we're playing stupid games. Russia's right in this, folks. I wouldn't blame them a bit to blow Ukraine right off the map. I wouldn't blame them a bit if they forced all of NATO off their borders. Couldn't blame them a bit. We promised not to do that. We lied to them. And if you don't think Red China, if we get into a conflict with Russia, you don't think Red China's going to cash in on that? If you think they won't, you're being real foolish. I can tell you right now, the day that if this war breaks loose, Taiwan's gone. It'll happen that day. Why? Because Red China's not stupid. They know they couldn't deal with it. We could not deal with both countries. And Europe darn sure isn't. We walk away from a European theater war, they'll run up the white flag. Yeah, Russian troops will be marching into Paris, just like the Nazis. And if you think that they're ever going to come over here and save our butts, maybe the Ukraine, Canada, maybe Australia are true allies, but most of them will not. We've already spent millions of dollars shipping equipment over to the Ukraine. For what? To fight off those nasty Russians who are doing the exact same thing we would do if the tables was turned. The exact same thing. I don't feel for the Ukrainians. I think the Ukrainians need to sit down with the Russians, with us out of the picture, and say, okay, what's it going to take to resolve this? We know you need a way to get the land line between your bases and Russia. How much land do we need? Let's see if we can't resolve this and work toward resolving it. One thing that would help would be to let them have the elections that they've been promising to have since they signed the Minsk agreement and haven't had the election. There's a treaty out there. The Ukrainians just haven't lived up to it. But let's all blame the Russians. Do your homework. Look hard at this, because you're being lied to. Just like you're being told that illegal aliens aren't being flown in commercial airliners, landing at airports after they've closed. That's something. Most all airports shut down for a while at night. We have a corrupt government. We need to stop it. We have a government that's not transparent. We need to stop that. Just remember, every time you hear something's classified top secret, it's another way of them saying, because we don't want you to know, because it'll piss you guys off, because we're screwing you. That's what top secret means in this country, and everything's top secret. This thing with Russia, we should pull out of it. You should be writing your senators and congressmen, because all of them want to get on the bandwagon. Because after all, we get into a war. That means we're going to use bombs and bullets and tanks and all that fun stuff that our defense contractors get to bill us for again. And there's money to be made in that. So, and of course, if the defense contractors are making money, so are our politicians. So this is a win-win for those clowns. The only people it's not a win-win for is the United States citizen who's having to pay the tax bill and watching their sons and daughters die in the battlefield. And this could get out of hand. It could get way out of hand. We won't have a planet left when they're done playing. And if you think Joe Biden is smart enough to sit back and look at that long term and say, oh, there's a lot of risks here, maybe we need to sit down and talk more. without telling the Russians, screw off. We don't give a crap about your security. Republicans, you take control of the House and the Senate, you better impeach that son of a gun. You got him already on dereliction of duty, possibly even treason charges for what he did in Afghanistan. You don't leave your enemy with a bunch of equipment. That's aiding the enemy. Okay? That's treason. Let's get him out of office. I'll vote for anybody, Republican or Democrat, who says that will be your first priority, is to get old Joe out of office. And good Lord, he's given you enough ammunition to do that. Get him out of office before he gets us into a world war. Because you just don't know. When superpowers start looking at each other and go, we got a chance now to take this sucker right out of the picture. I'm sure Red China and Russia both are sitting there going, you know, if those suckers was gone, the rest of everybody would fall in line. They would. And they know it. Well, let's not weaken ourselves to that point, folks. Or you'll be explaining to your children and your grandchildren how you let the country of America, the United States, disappear. Love you guys. Appreciate you. I know this sounds kind of drastic, but the Russians are right on this. We have no interest and no business fooling around in the Ukraine. Period. Realize that. They're doing nothing more or nothing less than we would do if put in their situation. We lied to them. We're wrong. They're right. Trump was right about NATO. Good organization for us to cut ties with. We don't want to be the world's policeman. Let the world police itself. Let us take care of our own problems. Okay? Love you guys. Appreciate you. Take care.